Hello friends, and welcome back to the channel, where we delve into the mind of a villain. In this entry, we'll be taking a look at Director Krennic from Rogue One, a Star Wars story. An ambitious and power-hungry military director, Krennic was in charge of the Death Star project, the success of which would propel him up the Imperial ranks, or so he thought. Krennic lives and breathes the Death Star. It has been his all-consuming obsession for 20 years, and this would be his make-or-break moment. If the weapon is successful, all the other planetary systems would have to bow to the Empire, earning him the Emperor's favor. But should the weapon fail, he would lose all reputation and credibility, and perhaps spend the rest of his life in an Imperial stockade. When it is finally ready for its first test, he beams with pride and excitement as he marvels at its destructive potential. On the outset, Krennic appears to be an efficient commander of the Empire. Unconventionally dressed in a white cloak with a hard stare and a raspy voice, he is relentless and adamant and territorial over his due credit. While his subordinates may freeze in the paralysis of battle, Krennic comes in to jolt them into action, putting a much-needed pep in their step. Krennic's most memorable trait is his aspiration, which he nearly chokes on. But an equally important quality of his is his overconfidence. In one of his more noteworthy lines, he tells a skeptical Governor Tarkin, "I will not fail." There is absolute conviction and certainty in his delivery, perhaps a bit too much. As director of the project, Krennic would seek out the expertise of Galen Erso, a former scientist who served under him, but parted ways with the Empire, choosing the peaceful life of a farmer instead of being part of their oppression. It would appear that Krennic somewhat acknowledges the cruelty of the Empire, but sees it as a necessary evil. When Galen tells him that he's confusing peace with terror, Krennic brushes it off, saying that they have to start somewhere to bring order to the galaxy. In that way, Krennic can justify his actions, hailing himself as a hero of the Empire as he builds a weapon capable of mass genocide. In the middle of his persuasion, Galen's wife intervenes and is shot dead in the altercation. Galen then is taken captive and forced to resume work on the Death Star. However, it is soon revealed that over the years that pass, Galen would build a fatal flaw in the weapon, which when exploited would result in a catastrophic destruction. Despite his strengths as a director, Krennic has this flaw, among others, his blind spot when it comes to Galen Erso. The fact that Galen was able to do this speaks to Krennic's lack of oversight and control. Given the amount of risk he carries, Galen should have been under the highest level of security, with every one of his actions scrutinized. This should have been done consistently from the start, instead of only at the end during Krennic's visit to Scarif. You cannot take away a man's wife, separate him from his daughter, force him to work for you, and then not expect some form of retribution. And in his holographic message to Jyn, Galen freely admits that after a time, he was actually no longer needed for the project, but merely lied to keep himself employed. It is another shortcoming of Krennic that he failed to catch on to this, allowing Galen to be the galaxy's greatest skiver. If Krennic had tighter measures on Galen and removed him, he would not have been able to sabotage the project. Perhaps Krennic's blind spot with Galen extends from the fact that they were close friends. Throughout the film, Galen addresses him directly as Krennic, his last name, despite being under his command. The novelization set before the events of Rogue One indicates that they grew up together. And in the film itself, a brief flashback shows that Krennic was well acquainted with not only him, but his family as well. When Galen reveals himself to be the traitor, it's suggestible that Krennic wasn't fully expecting it. You could argue that he was baiting Galen out by holding the other scientists hostage, but there appears to be some level of surprise in his expression as well. And even then, he does not execute Galen as he does the other scientists, but merely slaps him and mocks his failed effort. Director Krennic may not be the most memorable villain from Star Wars lore, but at the core, he is an understandable one. He just wants to be recognized for the good job he has done, and that is a desire that any of us can ascend to. He is relentless in his ambition, likely due to his upbringing. Gareth Edwards, the director of Rogue One, mentions that he had the idea of Krennic having a working-class background, having to fight for his position in the Empire. He has a chip on his shoulder due to his blue-collar origins, which results in his dedication to climb the corporate ladder. Krennic's desire for recognition causes him to be protective over his accomplishment. He aggressively asserts that the weapon is his achievement when Governor Tarkin, his longtime rival, tries to sneak his way in for credit. This enrages Krennic to the point that he vents his anger by firing on his squad of scientists later. Now, it's beyond the scope of what's revealed in the film to debate on who should receive more credit for the Death Star, but suffice to say, for a project at this level of scale, there would be plenty of credit to go around. Tarkin certainly had a hand in its success as well, as he appears with the Emperor and Vader at the end of Episode 3. But credit aside, Tarkin does bring up a valid point when he mentions that Krennic's recent failures shed some doubt on his capability as a military director. Specifically, his oversight with Galen Erso, and the fact that one of his pilots was able to successfully defect to the rebellion. So while Krennic may have been instrumental in the planning and construction aspect, perhaps he is not the best person to maintain control of the Death Star, with Tarkin being a more favorable choice. Despite knowing that Galen has compromised the project, Krennic appears to be more concerned with staying in the spotlight. He chooses to personally visit Vader to secure his reputation instead of directly heading to the base on Scarif to investigate. No doubt he was summoned by Vader himself, but given the urgency of the situation, his investigation on Scarif should have taken priority. And besides, they could always communicate through their holographic transmissions instead. In the heat of battle, we discover one more trait of Krennic's. He is no armchair general and goes into battle himself, as we see when he visits the Data Vault. While this might seem admirable, it may not always be the right choice. In a sense, it is prideful and foolish. In terms of his skill as a combatant, Krennic is average at best. There was nothing more he could add on that his stormtroopers are already capable of. Perhaps Krennic was perplexed by Galen's act of betrayal, that he was compelled to handle things himself, or perhaps he felt his generals were incompetent for the task. Either way, Krennic would be of better use by staying in the command center. Earlier, we saw how the Imperial leaders were stunned when the rebels launched a series of explosions. It took Krennic's outburst to jolt them out of their paralysis and to deploy the garrison. So it would make perfect sense that Krennic would be more useful overseeing the battle instead of deploying himself to do a job any of his soldiers could do. And while we're at it, Krennic's short-sightedness also proves to be his undoing. He fails to recognize that the attack on the beach was obviously just a diversion, and only turned his attention to the Data Vault when it was too late. His misordered priorities gave the rebels the opportunity they needed to get away with the plans. Tarkin, on the other hand, while light years away, immediately saw the root issue, that the real target was the Data Vault. At the end, Krennic is tragically killed by friendly fire, by his own creation no less, in a bid by Tarkin to secure the plans. Krennic's oversight, combined with his blind spot with his friend, ultimately causes his downfall. He died not as a hero of the Empire, but as one who will be remembered for the failure of the project that was so dear to him. But while Krennic has his flaws, his achievement as a director still stands, as the construction of a battle station the size of a moon is as monumental a feat as its destructive power. So what do you think of Director Krennic, folks? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and take care.